started with knowing طبعا this is chapter A6 audit responsibility and objectives. Part 2 because actually in part 1 we discussed the objective of conducting an audit of financial statement and an audit of internal control. واتكلمنا what are the main purposes of doing an audit, وقلنا ان there are some steps that we have to follow in order to achieve the objective of audit. وقلنا ان we have 1 2 3 4 5 steps to be done or to be followed. We actually in part 1 we finished the first one, which is understanding the objective and responsibility for the audit, and we started part of phase 2 or step 2, and this is what we are going to conclude or complete today, because actually we are going to explain the other 3 steps. طيب. I will go directly for dividing the financial statement into cycle. We started to know if you would like to divide the financial statement into cycle, but actually you have to be aware of the journals. And we said we have 6 journals. We have 6 journals. Each journal is concerned with specific type of transaction. We said we have sales revenue journal, we have cash receipt journal, we have acquisition journal, cash disbursement journal, payroll journal, and general journal. And we said in the sales revenue journal, we will include all the sales revenue based on credit, okay? And we said that all the cash receipts will be recorded in the cash receipt journal, even if it is sales in cash or cash sales. طيب يبقى whatever cash will be received, maybe against selling an asset, maybe against sales, maybe against receiving interest from bank, any cash that will be received will be recorded inside the cash receipt journal. Acquisition of goods and services, which is the acquisition, which is the payment, which is the purchase of goods and services. And actually, we will include here the acquisition on account. The acquisition on account. Okay, type. The cash disbursement journal is all the cash payments. Any cash will be paid by the company, it will be recorded in the cash disbursement journal. Okay, type. And then we got the payroll journal, and we said all the transaction related to the employees' wages or salaries will be recorded in the payroll journal. Right. And we said we have at the end the general journal, and the general journal will include all the transaction that cannot be included in the other 5. And we gave an example like the adjustments, like depreciation, like accrued expenses, accrued revenue, unearned revenue, all of the adjustment to be made there. The correction of error, if you have an error and you would like to correct that error, it will be recorded here. We talked about the closing entries, which is done at the end of the year to close the nominal accounts. It will be closed here. Actually, all the transaction we cannot include in any of the other journal will be included here. Sorry. Okay, طيب. يبقى دلوقتي as long as we understood the journals, we have to go to understand the sales, the cycles. Right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, 5 journal cycles. We have 5 cycles. We have 5 cycles. We have 6 journals and 5 cycles. The first cycle is the sales and collection cycle. The sales and collection cycle. Right. And from its name, it must include all the sales, whether it is on credit or cash. Okay, sales and collection. A sales journal will be included, cash receipt journal will be included, and the general journal. But why the general journal? Because maybe you would like مثلا to record the bad debt expense, the allowance for uncollected, and this is to be considered as adjusting entry. So actually you will need the general journal because part of the transaction must be recorded in the general journal. But what are the accounts that will be reviewed, okay, under the sales and collection cash, trade receivables or trade account receivables, allowance for uncollectible. Okay, طيب this is from the balance sheet. طب what about the income statement? Sales return and allowance, bad debt expense. Okay, but actually those are the accounts that we have to take into consideration while we are allocating the accounts, allocating the account. The second is the acquisition and payment. The second cycle is the acquisition and payment. And this will include all what the company will acquire, whether it is on account or خلاص paid. طب أقول acquisition and payment. Acquisition and payment. يبقى acquisition journal will be there. Cash disbursement will be there. General journal will be there. طب again, why general journal? Maybe you would like to make مثلا an entry adjusting inventory, adjusting depreciation أو يعني recording the depreciation. So actually it must be must be there. يبقى acquisition journal will cash disbursement, okay, and you will go for again the cash. Why again the cash? Because you are talking about cash payment. يبقى cash must be there. Type, and you are talking about acquiring goods and services. So actually, again, you are talking maybe about inventory, prepaid expenses for insurance, for rent, purchasing land, purchasing building, whatever. And on the other hand, which is the income statement, you will include mostly all the expenses. You will include mostly all the expenses. Yet from the name of the cycle, I can tell what are the journals that will be included and what are the accounts that will be affected from the balance sheet and from the income statement. Right. The third one is the payroll and personnel cycle. And again, payroll journal and general journal. Okay, right. Payroll, all the salaries and wages of the employees.
ايوه يا دكتور.
يبقى actually here
احنا خلصنا الحته دي يا دكتور.
يبقى actually the payroll خلاص we will include all the payroll journal and the general journal. Okay, and the balances that will be affected or the account that will be affected from the balance sheet and the income statement are cash from bank طبعا اكيد because actually we are paying about payroll مرتبات. طيب accrued payroll that is not paid yet. خلاص طيب accrued payroll taxes اللي هي السالاريز اند ذا لايك تاكس. لو انتوا خدتوا ال 404 فانتوا اوير ان في عندنا حاجه اسمها salaries and the like tax. اوكي طيب يبقى all of that from the balance sheet will be there and actually طبعا the expenses. الاس and A is standing for selling and administrative expense. Selling and administrative expense. طيب then we have the cycle of inventory and warehousing, which is acquisition journal, sales journal, and general journal. طبعا inventory and warehousing, acquisition because we are purchasing, and sales because we are selling, and general journal to do all the adjustments needed for that two accounts. And mainly we are going to address the balance sheet, inventory, and the cost of goods sold under the income statement. Right. Capital acquisition and repayment. And actually we are going to include all what have been acquired, okay, and paid. This is why here I got the cash in bank, notes payable, long term, accrued interest, blah, 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 and interest expenses. Okay, right. Both are the 5 cycles that we talked about. Sales and collection, number 1. Okay. Acquisition and payment, number 2. 3, the payroll. 4 is the inventory and warehousing. 5 is the capital acquisition and repayment. يبقى احنا we have 6 journals and 5 cycles. 6 journals and 5 cycles. Okay? طيب. Anyone do not understand any of the cycles? I shall repeat it now before I go for testing your understanding. Which of the following is not one of the steps used to develop audit objective? Okay. We ended the second step, which is dividing the financial statements into cycles. Okay. Type. Let's go to see what is the next step. The next step is to make sure that the management assertions about financial statement have been taken into consideration. The third step is to know the management assertion about financial statement. And in order to know that, we have to know what do we mean by management assertion. I said before that management assertions are specific criteria or specific facts that the managers or the management must take into consideration in order to prepare the financial statement. This is why he is saying that step 3 is management assertions about financial information. Management assertion about financial information. We have 3 categories of assertions. Assertions about classes of transaction and events for the period under audit. Assertions about account balances. Here I'm concerned with criteria to be taken into consideration for recording the transaction. The second type of assertion is balances. Balances. And as you know, there is a big difference between transaction and balance. Transaction is the individual transaction to be recorded in journals. But balances, whenever we are posting that to a T account, and at the end of the year, I will get balance. I will get the debit and the credit, and then I will get a balance. So this is balance. Okay? And assertions about presentation and disclosure, which is presenting these balances into the financial statements. Okay? Into the financial statement. Actually, the management assertions are classified into these 3 types. As you can see here, this is the assertion about classes of transactions. This is assertion about balances. And this is assertions about presentation and disclosure. Presentation and disclosure. Right. Let's start the assertions of classes of transaction. The first to be taken into consideration is the occurrence. What do you mean by occurrence? This is the first assertion that the manager must take into consideration while they are recording the transaction. Occurrence means that the transaction which have been recorded have occurred. Have occurred. يعني actually occurred. Type. How to know that? By looking to the books and then go to real life to make sure that the transaction are actually there. This is occurrence. I would like to make sure that all what have been recorded actually happened. Actually happened. Okay? طيب يبقى this is occurrence. I would like to make sure in the transaction recorded have actually occurred. طيب. What about completeness? Completeness of transaction, which means all the transaction and events that should have been recorded have been recorded. This is the opposite of occurrence. This is the opposite of occurrence. يعني in occurrence, I'm looking to the book and I'm trying to verify what is recorded in the books to make sure that whatever have been recorded in the books have occurred. لكن the completeness is the opposite. I have a group of transactions and I would like to make sure that this group of transactions have been recorded completely. يعني I went مثلا to the warehouse of the company and I found 10 items مثلا of specific product. In order to check for completeness, I have to refer back to the books and to make sure that the 10 items I found in the warehouse completely recorded in or included in the books. يبقى this is completeness. This is ايه؟ يبقى occurrence, looking to the books and then to make sure it is real. Completeness is the opposite. I'm checking on the real life and then to make sure that all what in the real life have been completely included in the books. Right. Accuracy. Accuracy is mathematical accuracy. I would like to make sure that all the numbers have been calculated correctly. So actually here I'm concerned with accuracy. Mathematical accuracy. Multiplication, division, addition. يبقى all يعني مثلا whenever I'm recording a sales transaction أنا as an auditor I can check on accuracy of that transaction. How shall I do that? By multiplying the number of units by the selling price to make sure that this total of the transaction is correct. This is accuracy. This is a accuracy. طيب. Classification. طيب. هو الترانزاكشن is the transaction are the transaction having a classification? Yes. واحنا we talked about transaction event have been recorded in the proper account. طب how to determine the proper account? In the previous step احنا we discussed ان احنا we have 6 journals and each journal is including a transaction from a specific type. يعني for example مثلا I'm talking about مثلا cash disbursement journal. يبقى أنا I will include only all the transactions that included cash out. يبقى this is classification. مثلا cash receipt I will include all the transactions that included cash receipt. يبقى actually here I classified the transaction and I got all the cash receipt transaction to be recorded. يبقى classification to make sure in the transaction have been recorded in the proper account. طيب. Cut off. What do I mean by cut off? Cut off means that you recorded the transaction in or at the right date. طب واحنا is this an option not to record the transaction in the right date? Yes. Some companies may defer, postpone transaction. يعني مثلا I made a budget خلاص ماشي for مثلا $1 million sales. And actually I achieved that budget this year. So maybe the management is aware that next year we will not be able to achieve our budget. So I will defer some sales for the next period. هنا management violated the cut-off. The cut-off means that I have to record all the transactions that happened during the current period at the current period. Okay, at the current period. Okay, يبقى cut off خلاص it is related to timeliness. Timeliness which is the time, the right time to record the transaction. 6 is the right and obligation. What is the right and obligation? It means that the manager must make sure that all the transactions, okay, are actually right to the company, owned by the company. Okay, and liability are the actual liability of the company. We are not overstating assets, we are not understating liabilities. طيب يبقى those are the assertions about classes of transactions. Those are the criteria that we have to take into consideration while we are recording transactions. Let's go for the balances. Let's go for the balances. طيب assertions about account balances. Here, I'm not talking about transaction, I'm talking about balances. Balances means totals. Yani you are not talking about a specific transaction, you are talking about total assets. You are talking about total liability. You are talking about total equity. Okay? So actually here you are talking about totals. About totals, I have to make sure, Anna as an auditor, as an external auditor, I have to make sure that these balances exist. These balances exist. What do I mean exist? يعني I looked to the books. خلاص I found مثلا an equipment of 10 million. In order to make sure that this is an existing balance, I have to go and count down, okay, the equipment that the company has in their place. This is existent. I'm making sure that the balances recorded or reported in the books or in the financial statements are, okay, exist, are really happened, are really happened. Okay, طيب يبقى actually here this is existence for balance. طيب what about completeness? All assets and liability and equity interests that should have been recorded have been recorded. يعني for example, I will send the bank for the bank and tell the bank, give me a statement including all the balances of the company. And whenever I receive this statement, I have to make sure that all the amounts that have been mentioned in the statement are completely exist in the books of the company. يبقى idea of occurrence and completeness is the same for existence and completeness. خلاص؟ Except for in احنا in occurrence and completeness we are talking about transaction, and in existence and completeness we are talking about balances. Okay? Like in the same idea in occurrence and existence we are looking in the books and then trying to make sure that whatever in the books are exist or occur. On the other hand, completeness in both transaction and balances. I'm looking to information and then I'm trying to make sure that this information are completely recorded or exist in the books. Okay? طيب يبقى this is existence and completeness. طيب what about valuation and allocation? Okay, valuation and allocation. طيب assets, liability, equity, interests are included in the financial statement at appropriate amount, and any resulting at appropriate time and any resulting valuation adjustment are properly recorded. يعني for example مثلا if we are talking about assets, actually this valuation and allocation are the same as accuracy, except for in accuracy I'm just checking on the mathematical error. Here for valuation and allocation I'm checking for two things: valuation, which means the value is correct, and the second one that the allocation have been made. Give me an example of an allocation. For example, whenever you are calculating depreciation for an asset, we are saying that the depreciation مثلا for based on straight line method will include مثلا cost minus salvage value over useful life. Actually an expense called the depreciation expense is resulted every year and it is recorded in the books, and it is accumulated depreciation is to be deducted out of the asset. It's to be deducted out of the assets. So actually here I have to make sure that this has been done in a right way. Right. What about if some assets to be revalued? Some assets to be revalued. يعني مثلا انتوا you studied impairment. فmaybe some of my assets will be impaired. يعني the value will change. But I have to make sure that that impairment have been made correctly. Impairment has been made correctly. يبقى valuation and allocation related to the value of asset, liability, and equity, and any adjustment happened to this value during the year. Okay? Right. At the end, we have right and obligation. Okay? طبعا احنا we skipped here classification and we skipped here cut off because we are talking about balances. And we don't have classification and balances unless we are talking about the financial statement, and this will come in section 3. And we don't have cut off because here we are not recording. We are adding and subtracting to reach for the balance of the account. We are not talking about cut off. Right. Rights and obligation is the same. I have a balance of asset. I have a balance of loan, liability. I have to make sure that these assets are actually owned by the company and the obligation are actually owed by the company. Maybe I will ask the company to provide me with contract of assets that I purchased that asset with. Maybe I will ask the company to provide me with the loan contract, to make sure that this balance is actually there. All of this must be taken into consideration while you are. I'm talking from the point of view of management. This is why I'm saying management assertion. Management assertion. All of those are from the management point of view. Management assertion. Okay? Criteria to be taken by management while they are recording, getting balances, reporting in the financial statements. Okay? طيب يبقى أنا I have 1, 2, 3, 4 assertions under the balances. طيب let's go for presentation. Presentation means ان انت you are going to present and disclose this information. طب where do we present and disclose this information? In the financial statements. In the financial statements. طيب we don't have occurrence or existence because actually we checked that balances before, but completeness is there. Why? Because I have to make sure that all disclosures that have been included have been included. يعني كل الحاجة اللي كان المفروض تبقى موجودة احنا we included in the financial statements. We have 10 disclosures, the whole 10 disclosures have been included in the financial statements. يبقى completeness of presentation and the disclosure. Whether it is financial or non-financial. يعني maybe I'm talking about the financial statements or maybe I'm talking about the notes attached to the financial statement, the disclosure attached to the financial statement. Okay? Right. Accuracy and valuation. Okay. Accuracy and valuation, that financial and non or other information are disclosed appropriately and an appropriate amount. This is again related to accuracy and valuation. I have to make sure when I made the impairment that the impairment have been calculated correctly. I checked that here, and I have to make sure that this have been included in a right way. Have been included in a right way. Okay? Right, very good. Classification and understandability. And I'm talking here about financial statements. So actually, I'm talking about the classification of the accounts inside the financial statement, and that we must provide the financial statement in a way that is understandable. خلاص بس understandable for whom? For the people that have at least reasonable background about accounting. Reasonable background about actually here classification. Okay, is that we are going to classify assets into مثلا current and non-current, fixed assets and current assets. Liability will be divided or classified into long-term and short-term. The equity will be included in that format. This is classification. Understandability. This is why we are following the standards, because the standards unifying the format of the financial statement everywhere, so it will be understandable for everyone. Not every company will do the format that is up to its mind. No, we will go for a constant format that will be understood by everyone. Those are the assertions to be taken by the management while they are recording, getting balances, preparing the financial statement. Let's move to the transaction, balance, and presentation related audit objective. طيب احنا we looked to the management assertion from the management point of view. But let's go for the for the auditor point of view or the auditor perspective. Okay? طيب فاحنا we are saying this is what the management must be taking into consideration. Me بقى as an auditor, when I go to audit, I will look mainly to the balance related and transaction related audit objectives. Okay, and those are closely related to the management assertions about classes of transaction and balances. Right. And there are two differences between balance related and transaction related objectives. The first one, which is the balance, are applied to account balance such as receivable inventory rather than transaction, as we said. And we have 8 balance related audit objective and 6 transaction related audit objective. Right. The transaction related audit objectives including transaction from the point of view of the auditor. خلاص؟ طيب the management already made or fulfilled its rule. خلاص؟ but actually me بقى as an auditor I have to fulfill برضه my rule by testing the transaction, but here we don't call it management assertion بقى. احنا we call it general transaction related audit objective. Transaction related audit objective. And we have occurrence, completeness, accuracy. This one is new, which is posting and summarization, classification, timing, right, and an obligation. Those are the assertion, but from the point of view of the audit. Okay. Right. Actually, again, the same meaning will be maintained, except for specific things that we're going to discuss. Let's continue what we started. We talked about the management assertions, okay? And we said those are the assertion from the point of view of the auditor. Sorry, from the point of view of the management. And now we are going to go for the corresponding from the point of view of the auditor, and it is called the transaction related audit objective or the balance related audit objective. The first to be looked at is the transaction related audit objective. Type. The transaction related audit objective is correspondence to the part which is the management assertions, but about transaction type. Occurrence will be the same, which means and then as an auditor I would like to make sure that the recorded transaction actually exists, okay, which is the same meaning that we discussed in the management assertion. Completeness also is the same. Me as an auditor, I will collect the information and I would like to make sure that all the information have been recorded correctly. Accuracy, I'm looking for the correct amount, addition, subtraction, multiplication, mathematical accuracy. Posting and summarization is the link between journal entries and the balances, as I just explained earlier. يعني whenever we are reviewing or auditing the transaction, I have to make sure that it has been posted correctly to the balance or the T accounts. So actually, this process is called posting and summarization. Posting and summarization. Okay, the transaction included in master files and correctly summarized in the T account or the ledger account. Type. Classification, as also we said before, we have 6 journal. We have to make sure that all the transactions have been recorded correctly in each type of journal. Timing, which is the cut off there, recorded on the correct dates. Right, an obligation to make sure that the transaction recorded are really the rights or obligation of the company. Okay, very good. This is the management assertion about transaction, as we said, and compared to the transaction related audit objective. Completeness the same, but to be applied on balances. Okay, type. Accuracy the same, to be taken into consideration in transaction, taking into consideration posting and summarization. يعني under transaction we have accuracy and posting and summarization. For me, in the balances, in the transaction, we have only accuracy. Again, here I'm talking from the point of view of management. Here I'm talking from the general point of view of the auditor. We have completeness, we have completeness. Accuracy and posting and summarization are the same as accuracy and management assertion. Classification is classification. Timing is cut off. Right and obligation is the same right and an obligation. And we just explained that now. Type. The balance related audit objective. The same. But let me go right away here. Existence is the same as the existent in the management assertion, which means all the balances خلاص are in the books are actually happened. طيب completeness, all the balances خلاص included have been included in the books. This are comparison between management assertion about balances and general balance related audit objective. Okay? طيب. Valuation and allocation in management will include here accuracy, classification, and the cut off. Valuation and allocation, the value of the assets, and if there are any modification or valuation that happen to that balance must be taken into consideration and that have been recorded at the year end appropriately. Okay. Valuation and allocation will include, from the point of view of the auditor, okay, the detail tie-in, okay, and realizable value. طيب, let's me بقى stop here. Valuation and allocation, we said that we have to make sure that the value of the assets are correct and actually included in the books with the right value. And allocation, I said, like مثلا the depreciation, like the allowance for doubtful account, all of those خلاص must be recorded. طيب, the detail tie-in is whenever we are as an auditor, but from the point of view of auditor, in order to make sure that the evaluation allocation of management have been done correctly, we have to go for detail tie-in. What is detail tie-in? The details related to the account. Details related to the account. يعني احنا we valued that assets for 100,000. I have to go into the details and see if that allocation is right or not. That valuation, sorry, is right or not. طيب. At what rate the company calculated the depreciation? This is برضه must be taken into. This is detail tie-in. يعني detail tie-in, which means I go for the detail of the account, and I have to reach for the realizable value. Realizable value is the net value of assets or liability. يعني for example, I will set the cost of the asset minus accumulated depreciation. The book value or the net book value resulted is to be called realizable value. Is to be called realizable value. Okay? طيب. يبقى detail tie-in and realizable value both equal to valuation and allocation under the management assertion about account balances. At the end طبعا right and obligation, we have to make sure that all the accounts are the right of the company, and واخد بال حضرتك all the liability are liability on the company. طيب. Here we are talking about presentation and disclosure. Presentation and disclosure. Okay. طيب. Completeness in management assertion is the same. We don't have existence or occurrence. We have completeness. Both are the same. All require disclosure related to notes payable. مثلا notes payable, for example, are included in the financial statement. Okay. يبقى برضو أنا as an auditor I have to check for that. طيب. Valuation and allocation. The same for me as an auditor as for the management assertion. Footnote, disclosure related to notes payable are accurate, which means the value are accurate, the amounts are correct. طيب. Classification and understandability. Notes payable are appropriately classified as to short-term and long-term, and related financial statement disclosure are understandable. يعني I classified the accounts payable to the short-term, and notes payable to the long-term, and all the related disclosure have been included in the financial statement in an understandable way, in a way that can be understood by people that have reasonable background about accounting. يبقى those are the presentation and disclosure, okay, that is related to actually this part is repeated. يعني if you looking here, this is presentation, and actually this is another example for presentation and disclosure. Actually this part is repeated again. I will eliminate it. Okay. طيب. يبقى I will skip that because actually this is what I just explained okay 2 minutes ago and I will go for test your understanding. طيب before I go is there any question